Hey there, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew Clarke and welcome to my kitchen. I needed a little bit of extra space to film this video. And what we'll be covering today is what is in my gig bag. Now, as you can probably see, all this stuff here is mono, and I had purchased one of their cases in the past, really loved it, reached out to them to see if they wanted to collaborate on anything. So they did send me both the pedal board here and this little accessory case that attaches to this case. It's called the Tick. And when I go to a gig, this here is exactly what I bring. So this guy right here and this, pretty much nothing else unless I am also bringing an amp. So without further ado, let's open these up and see what's inside. So I want to kick things off with the most simple thing. So I'm gonna move this over and we will grab the pedal board case here. And this is the pedal board rail from Mono. And this is really just the pedal board. So if you look inside here, you can see got my pedal board in there. If you want to see a full breakdown of the pedal board, I do have a video on my channel. A couple things have changed since. I think I've swapped out one or two pedals maybe, but pretty much the same. And then in this pocket up here, I keep anything that directly goes with the pedal board. So that's going to be the main cables. So we've got our two cables. So this is to go to the guitar, or from the guitar to the pedal board, and then from the pedal board to my amp. If I am playing with an amp, I'm not always doing that. These cables are from Revelation Cable Company. Super great cables. They'll be linked in the description if you want to check them out. And then the only other thing in here is just a power cable for the pedal board right here. So not only is this pedal board from Mono, but also the power supply that I'm using as well underneath it. You can see there, I do have one loose cable just for swapping out different types of power, but that is the underside of the board. These pedal boards and the power supply, they do come in some different sizes. This is the smallest size of the board, but it is the largest size of the power supply. So there are a bunch of options there, but that's it for the pedal board case. All we have is the pedal board and the cables that go along with it. Now, next up, we've got the actual guitar case here, and I'm gonna detach the Tick from the case. So essentially it just uses these Velcro straps, and you can just remove it like this. And I'm gonna set this to the side because we'll do this guy last. The guitar case is pretty straightforward. Inside of here, I guess I should show you, is a guitar. Now, I try and only take one guitar to a gig. I know there's lots of guys out there that like to play more than one guitar. For me, I am a one guitar person, so the country gig that I usually have, most of the songs are actually in E flat tuning. So rather than bring one guitar in E flat and then one in E standard, I'll just bring the one guitar in E flat, and then I'll just have a capo handy, or I'll just transpose the songs up a half step that are in E standard. By the way, the guitar I have in here is my Shiji Telly. The super great Telly, and it's super affordable as well, which makes it great for taking to gigs because I'm not super concerned about it getting beat up. These things come in under $1,000 and they play super, super great. I'll move this aside and we'll take a look at what is in this part of the case. So there's just this one front pouch, and in here, we got a strap. I change around the strap that I use for gigs, but I just recently got this from Mono as well. This is their Doolittle strap. It's just a very simple black cloth strap with the adjustable buckle there. Works with every single guitar, right? Because it's just a plain black strap. And then what else we have here? This is just a really old guitar tech set that I bought. I think I was still in high school when I got it. Anyways, I've had it forever. A lot of this stuff is not in the best shape anymore, but it's just got like a screwdriver that has like the reversible head, a bunch of Allen keys, which an Allen key set is super important to have with you. Especially, I like to have a variety because guitars, especially like the Fender style saddles on Tellys and on Strats, I'll take like a slightly different size of Allen key. And I know most of the time you're gonna do your setup stuff at home, but if you're going somewhere where the climate can kind of change a little bit, it gets really hot or really dry, then it's important to be able to do these things on the fly. I've played gigs before where the setup of my guitar, as soon as the guitar was out in the sun for half an hour, it went kind of crazy. So really important to also be able to adjust your truss rod as well. Inside here, we also have the string clippers, some gauges, an extra capo, and a string winder. One more thing, which is just strings. I always carry an extra pack of strings, at least one extra pack of strings. I have not had a string break on me at a gig since, It might be 10 years, 9 or 10 years for sure. I remember the last time it happened actually. Yeah, it was 9 or 10 years ago. I use Stringjoy strings. These are my favorite strings right now, just 9 to 42s. If I am playing in E flat, however, I will use 10s instead of 9s. For me, I love the Stringjoys just because they last a little bit longer and they kind of keep that snappiness and body for longer than regular strings. Before I move on here, I'll just kind of show you the inside of this case. So if you look, it works more like a sleeve, so it doesn't open all the way down one of the sides. And it's got this here, if you can see, which basically allows the neck to float so that if it does get banged up, your guitar's neck is going to be okay. Flying with guitars especially is very, very scary. And I've done it a whole bunch. I've tried it a bunch of different ways. And it's important to mention that I'm in Canada, and depending on where you are, there are different regulations and laws that apply. So in the US, they kind of have to let you try to carry your guitar on as a carry-on item, even though it doesn't fit into their regular dimensions. But in many other countries, that is not the case. So when you're in the US, a bag like this is going to be great because you're most likely going to be able to carry it on with you. Now, if it does go underneath the plane, these mono cases are built great, so you're probably going to be okay. Your guitar's probably going to survive the journey. But if you're traveling in a different part of the world, I'd highly recommend checking out like a proper hard shell traveling case. A few years ago, I actually moved to Armenia and I took one of my Sir guitars with me because I knew I was going to be there for a year. And I made sure to pack that thing very, very carefully. The case got pretty beat up. I obviously took it there and then took it back to Canada as well. The most important thing is obviously that your case is very sturdy, but also that everything around the guitar is well protected. And you want to make sure the guitar can't shift or move too much if it's flipped one way or the other. So I made sure to use padding to pack all the way around to make sure that the guitar could move as little as possible. And then also remember, detune all the strings, take the tension off the neck, because the changes in altitude, especially underneath the plane, they're going to affect the guitar. The only other thing that I mentioned is if you are going to travel with a guitar, I'd highly recommend traveling with a guitar with a bolt-on neck. That way, if something does happen and the headstock breaks or just one of those awful things, you're only replacing one part of the guitar rather than if you were to take a Gibson or something like that, the headstock snaps, you're kind of screwed. Okay, so next up, we're gonna move on to the accessory case. So I'll put this guitar back in its case. And this here is all we've got left. So in the past, I brought an extra backpack with me to house a lot of this stuff. But this is super handy. Like I said, it attaches right onto the front of the guitar case from Mono. And I'm gonna, actually, before I open it up, I'll let you kind of see all sides. It's got the Velcro here, 1, 2, 3. And then got the carrying handle right here. And I should mention this stuff is super heavy duty. I don't know if they're waterproof. I don't think they're waterproof, but I do know that pretty much all their stuff is pretty water resistant. So I'll open this guy up. All right, so it's a little bit of a mess, but I'm just gonna go through one by one and just kind of tell you what I've got in here. So a cloth, super important for me. I got very sweaty hands. So every single time after we do our sound check or something like that, I make sure to wipe my strings down just because I'll burn through a set of strings in one gig. This just kind of helps them last a little bit longer. And also when the sweat dries on the back of the neck, it's kind of a yucky feeling. So I make sure to wipe that off as well. Now, another thing I have here is this microphone stand, and this is specifically made for guitar amps. And I bring a 57 with me as well. So I'm gonna show you with this. So it just goes on like this. And this just clips. This is adjustable. All this stuff is adjustable. So even if you have, you want to use like a 906 or one of those flat mics, there's an attachment that allows you to use that as well. But it's nice to just be able to have a way to mic your guitar amp, because when you go to a gig, you kind of never know what the situation is going to be. I play a lot of gigs where I don't get to use an amp at all. I'm going direct, so I'll be using like the Universal Audio Dream. But then also sometimes you're using a backline amp when they already have there, or sometimes you're bringing your own amp. You just kind of never know the situation. So I like, just as a backup, to be able to have my own mic stand and a 57. In similar fashion, I also like to bring a vocal mic. I'm not that much of a singer, but I will usually do some backing vocals on the gigs that I play. And so I just bring a basic 58. The reason I don't go with any fancy mics for this stuff is because I'm not using them all the time. It's actually pretty rare that I do end up having to use them, but these things are very replaceable. They're not super duper expensive. And also a lot of the times the venue is going to be using these mics anyway, so they're what I'm used to using. Next thing here is tape. Now, the tape that I have here is kind of sad. I'm actually almost out of it. Sometimes I'll have electrician's tape. This is probably not the best tape. I would probably go with something like gaffer's tape. That's just a very multi-purpose tape that you can have. Works for a ton of different applications, especially when it comes to the stage. But if you don't have that on hand, it can be a little bit expensive. Just having some type of tape, I think, is really important, whether it's just to tape a set list down or to be able to fix something if something breaks. All right, next up, an extra power adapter. This is just a regular 9-volt adapter that you would use for your pedals. And this is just, this one's from One Spot actually, so the same company that does those bigger power supplies. I like to have this just in case if I do have some sort of power supply failure on the pedal board, or one of the inputs isn't working properly, or if I have an extra pedal, which I'm going to talk about in a second. It's very nice to be able to have this. Then comes one of the most important things for me, and that is this guy right here. This thing is like a $35 pedal, and what it is, if you've seen other videos on my channel, you might already know, but it is the American Sound from Joyo. And this essentially is my backup amp. So whether I'm going direct, if I'm going direct by choice, I'll use the Universal Audio Dream 65. But if I'm going through an amp, I might not have the Dream 65, but I always make sure to have this. So if for some reason my amp goes down, or I bring an amp and I find out I'm not allowed to use it, the sound guy doesn't like me, it's nice to be able to have a backup that's just very, very simple. As far as I know, these things just don't fail. I've never heard of one failing or anyone really having any problems with them. And they sound really good, obviously not as good as a real amp. And the Dream 65 is my favorite sounding amp pedal. But basically what I can do is I can go out of my pedal board directly into this, and then this guy can go directly into a DI box and then directly into the mixer. Joyo does have a few different versions of this pedal. This one is based just on a Fender sound, so it kind of does from kind of the 60s Fenders to the 50s Tweed stuff, kind of all over. It allows you to get a bunch of different Fendery sounds. And then moving on from there, we've got my in-ear monitors. Most of the time at a gig, I'm playing with in-ear monitors. They can be a little bit hard to get used to for some people. I love playing with them personally. It's very, very comfortable. It's nice to be able to hear everything really well. I got these some years back. They're from Ultimate Ears. I don't remember the exact model. They're not super, super high-end. I think they're only three drivers in them, so nothing too crazy, but they are custom molded, which makes it really, really nice. And then in here, there's also like this cable holder. This guy's not in there. This is an extra patch cable to be able to go from the pedal board to my amp pedal if I need it, or also if a cable fails on the pedal board. It's nice to be able to have a backup cable. I'll usually bring 1 or 2 of those. And then in here, there's this guy. This just allows you to kind of keep your cables organized. And this is my backup power cable. So whether this be for my amplifier or for the pedal board, they all usually use the same AC power cables. So always handy to have an extra one of those. And then an extra regular patch cable in case one of your cables fails. You find you need an extra one, or what happens to me all the time is one of my bandmates is like, oh, do you have an extra patch cable? Usually I'll always make sure to have an extra one just in case a situation like that comes up. Okay, we're just about done here. The last thing is this section of the bag here. So there is this mesh zipped thing, and inside here, kind of pull everything out. We have got a bunch of picks. The picks that I use are from Chicken Picks. These are the 2.5. I believe they are the Bad As is the model name. I love these picks, been using them forever. And then for acoustic, I use Blue Chip picks. They sound great. I don't like them as much on electric. I like the really, really thick picks that are very bright, but for acoustic, I love these guys. A couple extras of those. I always keep some backups. And then these guys right here, Grolsch washers. These are little rubber washers from the alcoholic drink Grolsch. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the beer, but these things are great for strap locks. Something else that these things are actually great for is with pedals. If you find that you're kicking the knob too often, with the bigger knobs especially, what you can do is you can take the knob off and you can fire one of these guys underneath. I've done this with my King of Tone, my Analog Man King of Tone, on all the big knobs. I pulled the knobs off, I stuck one of these underneath, and you put the knob back on, screw it on, and then it gives it more friction so you're not accidentally kicking the settings. These guys are super handy, so I always keep a bunch of those around. And then a slide. I'm a terrible slide player, but I do have one, and for some songs, depending on the gig, I do have to use it. This one here is the Ariel Posen signature slide from Rock Slide. I like it just because I have very thin fingers, and it works really well on both my third finger and on my pinky finger as well. And it's got the ball point on the end here, the ball end, which just kind of makes it a little bit more comfortable and a little harder to make mistakes with. Now moving on from that, we've got this one last section here, and this has got all this stuff right here. Got a capo. Very, very important, especially in a situation where you're playing songs that go into different tunings and you have to transpose with like an E-flat guitar, and then it's going to be open strings in E standard. Well, you're going to need a capo. This little guy from Diodario, I don't remember the model name, but this guy is my favorite right now. I've tried a bunch of other capos, the Shub capos I used for years, but I found myself bumping them off with my hand. This guy is just very low profile, so I'm able to stick it on there. And if I slam my hand against it, it's not really going to budge. I also have a Diodario string winder slash string clipper. This is just kind of like a multi-tool. These things are really handy. Obviously, I have the other little kit as well with a bunch of tools. But this is a little bit easier to use. So typically when I'm changing my strings, this is the guy that I'm using. The next thing here is just a pen. This is just a Sharpie. It doesn't really matter what kind of pen. This is just to make adjustments to set lists on the fly, or, I mean, there's a bunch of applications. Just having a pen handy and around is very important. I'm not signing autographs or anything crazy with it, but still very important to have. And then the last thing is my secret weapon, and that is this little Tide to Go pen. Do they still make these? I actually don't know. This thing is from 5 or 6 years ago probably, but it still seems to work okay. And if you've ever been to a gig, then you would probably know that typically you're going to eat food before you play, whether it's catering or you go out to eat before the show. And what happens when you go out and eat food, especially if you're wearing a light colored shirt and you get a stain on that shirt, that can be a very scary situation. Some people are probably really smart and just bring backup clothes. But for me, I like to bring this little guy. These things work so well. I can't even tell you how many times I've had to use this at a gig. They're just small and convenient, and I can't really imagine living without one of them. One last thing that I think is worth mentioning is, along with like my wallet and my keys and my phone and stuff, I always make sure to bring headphones with me. And the main reason for this is when you're at a gig, obviously it's nice to be able to listen to music while you're waiting and stuff like that. But also it's super important if there's a change with a song, or if maybe you don't know a song super well, while you're waiting for that gig or you're on the way to the gig, it's very, very nice to be able to have a pair of headphones to be able to listen. All right, so that's all I wanted to cover in this video. I hope you found it kind of interesting. I know when other guitar players do this, I find this type of thing very, very interesting myself. And is there something that you would personally add? Is there something I'm forgetting? I'd love to hear from you, so please make sure you leave that in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up button, and please also consider subscribing to the channel here on YouTube. I release a new guitar video just like this one once or twice a week. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. If you want to keep watching, YouTube thinks that you're going to like this video right over here. And if you want to support the channel, get some bonus videos from me, and get the official lesson notes for each video that I put out on YouTube, you can go check out my Patreon by clicking over there, or you can go below the video and become a channel member. Thanks for watching.